That means that we'll have this to distribute after the fact. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here on a Wednesday, wherever you're at in the world. It is noon out here on the West Coast. And I want to start off by giving a big thank you to a few people, but first and foremost, Satya Khan, who's on the call right now. She is my business partner, and she is the reason why things like webinars happen for everybody, and educational material. And if you read the newsletter today, that got you excited to come onto this call. Satya is the reason why those things happen. I would not know how to distribute my thoughts in written form to anybody. So thank you to her. And then definitely a big thank you to the entire Revival Strength coaching team, all the coaches that work for us and spread the message of functional bodybuilding all over the world to their clients. They have been instrumental in helping shape this entire fitness methodology, give me the space to be creative and to think about fitness principles and program design principles to enhance your training. So big thank you to all of them. I'm going to move into a slide deck that was also prepared in part by with the help of Satya. So thank you for that. And that slide deck will be up here shortly. Satya, give me a thumbs up if you see the slides. Great. Jojo McDuffie, give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides. Hell yeah. All right. You were the second person I could see in the video right now, so that's why I called you out. Okay, so let me minimize this up here so that I can actually see what I'm doing. Very good. And I suppose as we go, I don't actually see, let's see, where's the chat? Okay, so there is a chat box, and that is live and active. As we go through the talk today, I'm going to try and be mindful of the time and stick to the hour time frame for what we're doing. If you have questions that come up as we talk about different, or as I talk about different topics, you can put them in the chat box. I may or may not be able to answer them on this live webinar, but what I've done in the past with webinars is if I don't get to it, I take down those questions and they become content for upcoming newsletters that will go out, and probably do a Q&A just around topics that maybe people have here. And also welcoming your feedback, anything that you have to share after the webinar today helps us to know what do you want to hear about in future webinars. I believe that this is something that I certainly would like to become somewhat of a regular thing, so I can connect with you and ultimately enhance your understanding of what functional bodybuilding principles entail, whether you're an athlete, a coach, or a combination of both, just to enhance your experience using the principles. All right, here we go. So I guess we're diving into the topics of program design for how I look at functional bodybuilding designs. And specifically, we're going to talk about the program that is active and live right now called Persist. Persist is really got launched during the shelter-in-place period of time as a minimalist program because, as many of you had lost access to your gyms and had little to no equipment to train with at home, it was a mission of mine to really help you as coaches and athletes understand that just because you've gone minimalist doesn't mean that you have to give up on training with purpose, training with progression, training with intent. I think in the first few weeks of shelter in place, we saw more burpees, push-ups, and sit-ups done than maybe ever before in the history of modern day fitness. And that was great. I love to see people continue to move. But after 2 to 3 weeks of doing the same burpees and air squats and sit-ups, people started to get a little bit bored of the repetition. They're like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this intense, same burpee situation. I don't know how long I can last in that. So we came out with Persist Minimalist, and it took a lot of functional bodybuilding principles, and with a couple dumbbells or your body weight, the idea was to show how we can create balance in a training program with just minimal stuff. Now, we're launching next week on Monday, the kind of accompanying part of the Persist program that's going to give people with full gym access a different track and a different program to follow that utilizes more of the tools that you've become familiar with in the functional fitness world. So there's going to be kind of two complementary and side-by-side tracks that will help people that are still in a minimalist training environment, people that are getting back to the gym, people that want to have both options. So members of the Persist program will have access to both. So secrets to successful design. I'm going to start really broad, and we're going to focus on a couple specific points today. When our company designs for specific individuals, we look at them, what their needs are, their schedules every day, what their training experience looks like. We get very granular about what they're capable of doing. When we look at how to design for a group of athletes, like in Persist, we have to be able to accommodate different skill levels. There's going to be people that can do muscle ups, and there's going to be people that can't do muscle ups. So where do muscle ups sit in a program like that? The other thing is that an individual who has weak squatting abilities, they might need 2 to 3 days of squatting every week in order to bring up that weakness. Now, if I've got a group of 1,000 people and I don't know who's got what deficits and what strength imbalances, I have to kind of create a better strategy for how I'm going to balance movement throughout a given week. So I have to think about movement patterns. I have to think about intensity. Too much squatting, not enough squatting, too much pushing, too many burpees in a week. How am I going to keep people from overtraining, getting burnt out? I'm going to talk about hardware and software, which is a terminology that I am stealing from my good friend Dave Lipson. He used that term to describe something that I've known for a long time, but it just really stuck. You know, your computers have hardware and they have software. Our bodies have hardware and software. I'll discuss the differences and how strength training and strength balance versus absolute strength training sort of touches on both, and why we need to have a balance of both in good, successful design. And then the thing that's present in every FBB program is a use of tempo resistance training protocols. And we're going to look at why I know now to this, this today, present day, why that's so much more valuable than I maybe even originally thought, and why it still continues to show up, despite the fact that people who do training programs with tempo can get a little bogged down in like the counting. It's like, I got to count, and it's just more to think about. And yes, we're still doing it because there's so much value to it. And we'll touch on some training examples from Persist, and I can outline some of these things that show up. Okay. Yeah. So the goals: have a better understanding of these functional bodybuilding concepts. If I present 4 or 5 topics today, I want you maybe by the end of today to have 1 or 2 that you're really going to focus in on yourself over the next month. Whether you're just following the program, maybe you're going to dive really closely into the tempo training because now you've heard some reasons why it's important. Or maybe as a coach, you're going to really think about structural balance within your training programs that you're giving your clients. And then hopefully there's something that you can immediately, put to work tomorrow in your training, or this coming Monday when Persist launches in this merged 2-track way. And we're always looking for ways to get you thinking more as an athlete and as a coach. Something that I wrote down was that you can have success in a variety of different training methods. And whether you're following a group program or an individual program, the more knowledge that you have around what you're doing within that training, the better the outcomes are going to be for you within that program. So empower yourself with knowledge so you can get more out of what you're doing as an athlete or as a coach. I think one of my wishes was that I could create a program that was right for everybody, right? And I think every coach along the way is like, how could I just write one thing that makes everybody better? 100% of people could be successful on this. And I think the reality is that, well, I know the reality is that that's not attainable as much as you try. You want to be inclusive, but I don't care how good the program is, there are going to be people that fall on the outside of that. Now, you can, as a coach, think about, oh, how do I include more people within the same program? And that's what this slide is kind of alluding to. It's this idea that we have beginners and advanced athletes that have done FBB programs side by side and have both had success within the same 8 to 12 week program. And how can that be? How can somebody who's an advanced person who's trained for 5 to 10 years get something out of a program that somebody who's only been training for 12 to 16 months can get training benefits from? And that's just by having a range of skilled movements and knowing why those skilled movements are beneficial for each of the different categories. The risk in having multiple levels within the same program is that, okay, maybe this person's not getting a lot of value out of that because it's too fundamental, it's too rudimentary. Or this person's getting pushed too hard in that movement because it's outside the scope of their ability. They might get injured, they might overtrain. But let's take a look at why within a program that has multiple levels, you would implement both lower skill and higher skill movements, and then how to kind of direct the client or direct you yourself as an athlete, how to think about that so that you don't fall victim to one of those things, right? Somebody comes in, doesn't know any better. They see that there's squat snatches on the whiteboard. They've only been training for 6 months. They're going to go hard because that's what they see everyone around them doing. Should they be going hard on a squat snatch after doing 6 months of training with really no fundamental basics in the Olympic lifts? No, they shouldn't. They should have a PVC pipe. They should be doing overhead squats. They should have an empty bar that they're just drilling for 30 minutes nonstop. That's what they should be doing. But instead, they see the people around them. They aren't told any better. They load up weight on the bar. They tweak a shoulder. You know, whose fault was that? Okay. So lower skill movements, they are essential for beginners because that's what allows them to climb the fitness ladder and build a great foundation. You think of something like a goblet squat. That's a very low order, lower skill movement. Okay. It's not the lowest order, but it's lower order. And that is going to be great for a beginner to develop great core strength, develop great motor control, actually develop some great leg strength. I mean, if your dumbbells at your gym or your kettlebells go up to 100 pounds, you've got at least 12 months of goblet squatting in you before you can sort of max out on that, and potentially even more than that. So low skill movements have a place, of course, for beginners. But for advanced trainees, you might think, like, I back squat, I overhead squat. Why would I ever go backwards in goblet squat? Well, by going backwards to fundamentals or to lower skill movements, what you do is you make sure that you keep this robust foundation in your fitness. When you back squat at high percentages, you are inevitably compensating in some aspect of your movement patterns. Whether you have a mobility issue that's going on and you're kind of slightly out of position, just marginally out of position because that heavy load, if you're doing that all the time, that adds up. Now you go back to a goblet squat, you can perform perfect squats with great motor control where your hips get full range of motion and you get deep muscle contractions in parts of your hips and your legs and your glutes that otherwise would not be getting them when you're doing back squats. So that's important for tuning up the system as an advanced athlete. It's helping you stay healthy for the long run. It is why in functional bodybuilding programs like ATS that last for a year and progress the whole way still have periodic drops where we go back to the fundamentals and we establish really good hardware tune-ups. And even in low skill movements like the goblet squat, for an advanced trainee, you can do some overload training, and that is it's super impactful on your fitness. So I go with the goblet squat. I'm still on that example, right? Like, get me 100. Like I went to a fitness kind of experience, and the test, one of the fitness tests we did was take, I think it was 60% of your body weight in a dumbbell and perform a max set of goblet squats. And the top score was going to be like 30 if you get 30. So I did a 120-pound goblet squat for 30 reps. And it was, that was overload to me. I mean, that was max effort. And it was a low skill movement. So low skill movements still for the advanced athlete can be overloaded and create a great training stimulus. Okay, higher skill movements. The double kettlebell rack pistol, right? So this is, the picture on the left with the chalk puff that's in front of me. By the way, if you ever want to squat really well, shut the lights off, get a spotlight, and get a bunch of chalk poofed around your face. You will squat excellent. That's the only reason I can do a double kettlebell rack pistol squat. So why are high skill movements good for beginners and advanced trainees, different levels of athletes? How should you look at them? Well, a couple of reasons. Well, for beginners, they see beginner athletes come into the gym and they see higher skilled movements being performed. It kind of can serve as a guiding light for them. I mean, on the one hand, it can be intimidating, be like, oh, that looks scary. I don't ever want to do that. But after a period of time of training and they start to see other individuals that look like them that have just been doing it longer, start to think, hey, I might want to ascend to that level of fitness. I want to be able to do a muscle up. I want to be able to do a squat snatch. I want to be able to do a pistol like that. That looks kind of great. The other thing that those high skill movements can do when they're guided correctly to not overreach early on. So a beginner, this squat snatch example I gave, it's like, as long as somebody isn't telling them to put 95 pounds in the bar and try and go for it, and they're just drilling them, even at light loads and even at, low speeds, they're going to recognize that, whoa, these are hard, and they're going to really expose some weaknesses I have and help reinforce my need to stay in some of the lower skill stages so that I can develop faster. So again, as long as we're not pushing too much intensity for them, they can be fun challenges. They can keep the training varied, and they can keep you, guiding towards something more challenging in the future. And then for the advanced trainee, excuse me, I am just trying to learn how to, look at that. There we go. This whole technology thing is just, it's fantastic. Okay, higher skill movements for advanced trainees. Again, these are tools that we use to continue to elevate our brain's like neural connections. All right, so let's just think about this. Like an intermediate athlete has got like all the fundamental power lifts down. They could do bench, squat, deadlift. They've got decent numbers. But now we're moving into something more advanced, which is like an Olympic lift, right? Where you're taking strength and speed and you're combining them into a coordinated endeavor. Now, to go from a 320 pound or 315 pound deadlift to now a 225 pound power clean with good technique, that's not a strength issue. That's a technique. That's a brain connection. That's a strength speed application challenge and upgrade that person needs to make. So the requirement there is to elevate your brain's capacity, not just your body's physical capacity. And that becomes a reward, right? I put in the work and now I can do the muscle up. I have 10 strict chin-ups. I can do a weighted dip at half my body weight. I've got the underlying strength, and now look at this. I get to go try the muscle up, and I learned it because I put in the time at the lower stages. And then ultimately, you get into these high skill movements, and it just makes fitness more broad and more fun, right? If you only have 10 movements that you feel confident and skilled in to do, then that's going to be the scope of your fitness. Yeah, you can put together a lot of combinations with 10 movements, but expand that to 50, to 100 now, and you feel like those are not just reach movements that are within your grasp to control. You've got yourself a ton of options within fitness. All right, so the other bullet point from kind of the overview page was that we need to have balanced movement patterns and intensity in a given week of training. This is how we avoid burnout. This is how we avoid overuse injuries. And this is a way to, again, broadly hit, the fitness traits and fitness movement patterns and strength patterns that we see, in the gym, without biasing any one thing, so to speak. So I gave the example of, like, you might have a client, or you might be thinking to yourself, like, I'm really weak at deadlifting. I'm not a good deadlifter. Okay, so that might be true. And we do some testing and we find out that, in fact, your deadlifting is relative to your squatting and your upper body strength is pretty low. So you might do best with 2 to 3 days of deadlifting type accessory movements and deadlifts each week. But that is a biased training program. That is biased towards your hinging deficiencies. And if you're not deficient in hinging and you deadlift 3 times a week and you're able to produce a lot of force and power in that, now you're deadlifting 3 times a week. That means something else isn't getting as much attention. Over time, you develop an imbalance, because now you went from balanced to training something a lot, and now you're imbalanced, or now your lower back is starting to feel achy because you're just hinging too many times every week for you. So if we want to find balance for people, we can do testing. And if we want to have balance in a group training program, I like to just think about balancing these kind of 6 categories of movement. There's hinging, there's squatting, there's single leg maneuvers. So single leg hinging and squatting, that kind of gets its own category. That's like lunging, pistols. There's upper body pushing and the variations that happen there. So there's horizontal, vertical, single arm, all upper body pushing, all upper body pulling. And then core and locomotion would kind of be the last area. So like direct abdominal work, direct core work, crawling, and things of that nature, carries. Okay. So if I want to balance 6, and I got 5 training days a week, okay, then I got to think, well, where do I put these things so that each one gets a little bit, of attention? And so I put up a sample training split. This is actually what Persist, starting on Monday for the full equipment program, is going to look like. This is the movement pattern split. On Monday, you'll do hinging and vertical pushing. On Tuesday, you'll squat and do upper pulling. On Wednesday, you'll do some horizontal pushing with core work. Friday is going to be a lower body dominant day with hinging and squatting. And then Saturday is upper push, pull, and core. And if you're really looking at this with a close eye, you'll see that pushing is in here 3 times. I've gone ahead and made sure that the Saturday pushing, and the Wednesday pushing, the total volume of that is complementary to what the other movement patterns are getting in the way of frequency. So everything's getting twice kind of a week, with the exception of pushing. Now you also see that there's an intensity component to each day. All right. Well, same thing with intensity. I came up in the, I had a lot of different my training history is very diverse, but let's just go to, circa 2010, I got really into CrossFit. And what was the intensity training split in CrossFit? There was none, right? There was no periodization. It was, you go intense and max out every single day. So Monday would have been whatever it was. And the other thing was, there was no movement pattern balance in CrossFit either. Monday could have been squat and upper pull with high intensity. Tuesday could have been squat with upper pull and high intensity. Wednesday could have been squat and upper pull with high intensity. What does that look like? That looks like, Monday you do Helen. Tuesday you find a max back squat and a max weighted chin up. And then Wednesday you do, Fran. Boom. You just squatted 3 days in a row, max effort, and done a lot of pulling. And that was common. And then Thursday you take a rest day. Which, it didn't happen like that every week, but it wasn't uncommon for it to happen. And I think that style of design has the recipe of getting people burnt out with overuse injuries. By day 4 or day 3, your quads and knees are feeling junky. All right. So some days you purposely ramp up the intensity, and some days you purposely lower the intensity. And what that does is it gives you this ability to ease yourself into a week, get hard with your training, and then taper off before a recovery day. And keep in mind that lower intensity doesn't mean less output on a given day. Intensity is a measure of the peak amount of effort that you give. So Fran, the workout that's 21-15-9 of thrusters and pull-ups, which done at a elite level happens in under 2 minutes. That is a very intense 2 minutes of work. Okay. But if you come in and do Fran and you do 2 minutes of work and that's all you do for your session, your total energy output or caloric expenditure, or just like how hard did you work that day, like in terms of total workload, is very low. Okay. That doesn't require a tremendous amount of output. So people who like to go to the gym, many clients like to go to the gym, they like to actually feel like they move their body for a long time. Why? Because movement is therapeutic. You get to breathe, you get to sweat, you get to explore your body. You have an hour in your day to go dedicate to something physically active. You want to move for 60 minutes. You don't want to go and warm up for 30 minutes, work out for 2 minutes, and cool down for 28 minutes in a puddle of your own sweat and vomit. That doesn't feel good to somebody. Okay, so again, lowering intensity doesn't mean we're going to have an easy workout. It just means that we're not going to reach for those peak, I just really dug in and went for it. You want to have fewer days of that in a week, because when you really dig for it, it kind of wipes you out. It wipes out your CNS. So a couple high intensity days a week, more moderate to low intensity days, allows you to do more training, feel better by the end of the week, and continue to see improvements. All right, here's the hardware software conversation. And I'm going to talk about it as it relates to strength balance versus absolute strength. Strength balance, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of this water. Spill a little bit on myself. Strength balance and absolute strength is something I refer to in the programs. As a matter of fact, something I started to do with Persist Minimalist, and I'll continue to do with Persist Program, is to identify hey, what's the, in any section of our training, and I can do this for clients, I can do this for group programs, is to sort of say, this is what we're focused on here. This is what we're trying to do. As you become a thinking athlete and you see a header that says continuous effort, moderate aerobic conditioning, oh, Marcus talked about on the webinar, that's how this part D in my training is supposed to go. So when I refer to strength balance versus absolute strength, I'll kind of give a little context is what I'm talking about. So hardware, remodeling and reinforcing your hardware, or maybe even just building your hardware, the foundation. Our bodies, our muscles, our connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, joint integrity, muscle density. These are physical characteristics of our musculoskeletal system, our bone density. We have to build that. That takes physical work. That takes time. That takes repetition. If you don't have the physical structure, the hardware taken care of, then you don't get the ability to go into doing the advanced stuff. You have to have that stuff really, really, let's just say, taken care of, refined, remodeled, reinforced regularly. A house got built in the 50s. You just bought it in 2020. You got to go in and look at the foundation. You got to have an inspection. You might have to rip out some dry rot and remodel it and put some new, a new roof on it and do some upgrades to the foundation. You got to have these things there. And that's what strength balance, as I see it, is all about. And that's a huge aspect of functional bodybuilding that is hidden in the unilateral training, the kind of strange different movements, the kettlebell loaded stuff, the single arm loaded dumbbell work, many of the warm-ups, like just it's peppered throughout the entire ecosystem of functional bodybuilding. Strength balance is what continues to help the remodeling and the hardware building process. It's hypertrophy training. It's bodybuilding. That's what gets it to work. Okay, and the further you move away from that and you get into the high intensity fast stuff, the more that hardware starts to kind of get neglected and break down. So we always got to come back and do some of that. That's why we have strength balance work. Are you going to be pushing max effort, top end loads on that? No, you're not. That's not where you do that. This is where you work at moderate loads. It's where the time under tension, the tempos are slow and painful, and you're like, oh, this is so hard. I can't believe this is like, you got 10-pound dumbbells and I'm just getting crushed by this. That's what that stuff is all about. So it's going to help build the muscle fibers. It's going to break them down so that you can build them back up. It's the, delayed onset muscle soreness. It's all that. But then on the other hand, we're going to venture into the absolute strength category. We're going to push the top end. How do you elevate the top end? Well, you got to have good fundamental hardware in place. But then if you're going to push the top end, this is where your brain has to start working. We have to kind of, I don't want to say trick your brain, but we got to push your brain to the edge. This is how we raise our 1 rep maxes. As a personal anecdote, it's like I do a lot of strength balance training. I have gone very much into that side of my training ever since I stopped competing, because I'm not judged on my 1 rep max numbers anymore. And to be perfectly honest, I hit some pretty big numbers in my career, and I don't really have a lot in me that says I want to get higher strength numbers. So I've kind of biased towards strength balance. I feel terrific. My body feels good. My joints, my ligaments feel great. I'm still strong, but I'm not as strong by the numbers as I used to be, because I don't spend a lot of time in that pushing my absolute strength, pushing my top end strength. If you don't do it, if you're not pushing the brain to those levels, it doesn't want to maintain that. If you don't get under a heavy barbell for a couple of years, there's no amount of, moderate weight split squats that's going to keep your back squat at 450. You have to do it sometimes. So there has to be a challenge to your brain's software to keep those higher level strength numbers. Similarly with skills, like refined skills, Olympic lifting. I could take a year off of Olympic lifting and go grab a barbell and still snatch, but it would not feel very good. It would feel rusty, and I would have, my timing would be off. And it's because my brain software hasn't been, upgraded and given a chance to work. And especially if I tried to do a heavy snatch or a max snatch, it would just really be off. So making sure you're playing both sides and then understanding where that fits for you, right? Do you need to be I would argue that we all need to be doing strength balance work. How much absolute strength, how much pushing into that highest threshold do you need to do? That's debatable depending on what your goals are. But there's still going to be that showing up in your training. And for me, it still shows up in my training. Hey, build to a heavy 6 in the deadlift. Okay, I'm not going to go for my 6 rep max, but I'm going to go for something that's hard. That's going to keep my brain software kind of working. Hopefully that was gave some context on those two. Take a pause to look at some of the questions in the chat box and just see what's. Oh, okay. These are kind of questions. Yep. All right. Those look like more logistics questions, but if there's really a good one in there, Sati, just text it to me so I can know to answer it. Ooh. Okay. why is tempo even more important than I thought? And the first bullet point is to remind me to talk about really the lessons that I learned through programming Persist Minimalist for the last several months. Tempo gives us a whole way of manipulating the types of contractions, the challenge that each contraction places onto the individual by just keeping you under tension longer or shorter. Okay, so tempo, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a way of prescribing in a resistance exercise how long you spend in 4 different phases of the movement. So every exercise that every dynamic, exercise, meaning you're taking your body or a weight through a range of motion, has an eccentric phase of the contraction, and this is when you're elongating the muscle. So in most cases, that's lowering against gravity or with gravity. Then there is the bottom position. It's an isometric, it's a pause or it's a hold. And then there's the concentric, or the shortening of the muscle tissue, the contraction, that many people think about. So it's like coming up out of the exercise or going up against, gravity. And then there's the isometric pause at the top. So with a squat and a pull-up, the squat you start at the top and you go down. Pull-up starts at the bottom and goes up, all right? We still refer to all these phases the same, they just start in different places. Now, if you just, as a simple example, if you do a 10-second eccentric squat versus a 1-second eccentric squat, so go down in 10 seconds versus go down in 1 second, immediately you just know that that's going to feel different for you. And with people training in the minimalist setting, where they, in many cases, just had a set of dumbbells or one dumbbell or one kettlebell, they didn't have an option of adding weight to a squat. It was going to be a 35-pound squat every week. But we could manipulate tempos over the course of many weeks to create progression. And we could use tempos to take lighter loads and get metabolic stress into the muscle tissue to get a training stimulus that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to if we had just disregarded tempo. Recently had a Persist Minimalist participant send me a testimonial and a before and after. And it was remarkable that this individual, with minimal equipment, minimalist training, was able to put on 10 pounds of lean tissue in 3 months by following the minimalist program. And I'm not here to say that that's not a one person example or case study, is not to say that okay, this is the best program ever, because it it might be, I think it is, but what it does say is that, hey, you know what? Hypertrophy doesn't require lots of weight. Building good hardware, building good muscle tissue doesn't require you to have a full gym. What it requires is thoughtful training methods, likely some good dietary choices that this client made, and using things like time under tension and some of the other concepts that we'll get into today and in future webinars, like supersets, etc., to be very thoughtful and purposeful about how you approach designing, even with just 2 dumbbells. Sustainability in training. This is the concept of, how do we keep our bodies healthy as we move through many, many years of training. Fast contractions versus, varied speed contractions is sort of what I see as the 2 competing thoughts. Now, I was in a sport that valued fast contractions, speed of contraction, moving quickly, getting work done fast. That was CrossFit as a sport. And when I was in that sport, as I got stronger, as I got better, as I built more capacity, my body deteriorated more. How is that? I was getting stronger. I was building capacity. I was able to do more. Yet by the end, I was totally burnt, totally smoked. Well, that's because that type of training and that type of sport really valued speed and contraction. And speed and contraction and going fast means that any errors that you have in movement quality get amplified and start to put strain and stress on your body. So with tempo training and using and like really leveraging slower tempos, pauses, isometrics, what I've learned, what we've learned over the last few years with FBB training is that it can offset some of that speed. It can offset some of that intensity and create a more sustainable approach to training. Get you in better positions more often without sacrificing that thing that's so important to everyone, which is the feeling of I just worked hard. Why do people want to move fast and hit the workouts as fast as they can? Because when they get done, they feel accomplished. They feel satisfied. I just put in the work. If I go for an easy jog, if I go slow, I don't feel that. Okay, well, guess what? We've solved that problem by figuring out how to actually use principles in the gym to make you work harder with less of the speed and the beatdown. So, as my buddy Dave Lipson likes to say, there's plenty of ways to get intense that have nothing to do with going fast and lifting heavier weights. And I agree. I did one of his chest day workouts, and I was lifting, I think, like 30-pound dumbbells, and I was obliterated for like a week. Could barely like scratch my head. Okay. Muscle pump, tissue perfusion, satisfaction, and training. Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Pumping Iron had a famous quote. I won't really repeat it here, but essentially, most people probably know it, but essentially is, you know, the muscle pump is what we all want. It's a really great, satisfying feeling. And there's so much truth to that. Getting your body to pump blood through working tissue, getting the pump, getting that feeling of like, man, I'm working hard, is very satisfying. And it has the ability to give the client that feeling of satisfaction that they can walk away from the gym being like, I did something great. Nothing like a good tempo squat at a slow cadence with some pauses to help get the pump going. Time under tension is what really leads to that. And this is a way to have control in your training, but still get that satisfaction from training. So tempo for the win. Moving on. I'm going to look at some of these questions. We will definitely get into some examples of absolute strength work. Oh, here's a question about intensity and how do we base intensity off of. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked a question about rate of perceived exertion. RPE is a concept of you go into the gym and you think to yourself, well, how am I feeling today? I'm a 7 out of 10 versus another day where you wake up, you're like, I'm 10 out of 10. I'm feeling awesome. So the 7 out of 10 Marcus and the 10 out of 10 Marcus both step up to a 200-pound clean. 10 out of 10 Marcus, like, that was easy. That was like 5. That didn't feel like hard at all. Meanwhile, the 7 out of 10 Marcus, the one that's not feeling his most chipper, feels like that was a 1 rep max. That was so hard. So on that day, should I be lifting 200 pounds for each person? Well, if the intent is, you know, absolute strength and like trying to push yourself, then maybe 7 out of 10 Marcus should be working at 185 pounds, and then 10 out of 10 Marcus should be working at 250. You have to learn this about yourself, and you have to know, what am I trying to get out of the training? What's the intent of this training? And that's how we use RP. That's how I use rate of perceived exertion, is to know, okay, I'm going into this. It's supposed to be strength balance work. It's not supposed to feel like strength balance work. It's supposed to feel like a 7 or 8 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. So what is that going to look like today in terms of a weight selection for my Philly press? And that's what you can base it off. And that's why I don't love prescribing weights for people. I put them into conditioning pieces simply because our community has become accustomed to seeing an RX, but I would much rather teach you all how to actually know what's the purpose behind section A, B, C, and D of your training, and then you go and pick the right weights. I have a coach. He gives me training. He gives me weight prescriptions. I look at those and I'm like, okay, I think I know what he wants me to feel like today. And I know if I pick up that 88-pound kettlebell and try and do this, I'm not going to feel like that. I'm going to feel like garbage. So I'm grabbing the 60. I'm grabbing the 50. And I make my own auto-regulation decisions based upon my RPE scale and where I'm at. Tissue perfusion. What is meant by tissue perfusion? Tissue perfusion. So, at rest right now, I'm sitting down on a stool. My thighs are not doing any work. Okay. So my heart and my body knows to send send blood to the areas of my body that are working. So there's not a lot of not a lot of blood going to my quads right now. The blood is going to my brain because I'm thinking and I'm talking to you. The blood is going to my digestive system because I just ate lunch before we all sat down to chat. So my quadriceps are not perfused with tissue, the tissue of my quadriceps are not perfused with blood. There's not nutrients going to them. There's like, if out of 100% capacity that they have to take up blood and nutrients and oxygen, they're probably at 20% right now because they don't need it. But if you go and do a bunch of, tempo air squats and some lunges and things like that, they're going to get some blood going really fast. And when we get blood going into the tissue, we get nutrients, we get a pump, we get mechanical stress, metabolic stress, and then adaptations that happen. Okay, so let's look at this example day. See what we can pick out here in the way of some of the concept that we discussed. So you can see the push, if we look in the upper right, we got push and hinge strength balance. Okay, so this is structural balance work. This is not absolute strength. We're not going for max effort loads on this. The time under tension for these two exercises, this superset, is relatively high, a 3-1x1 tempo for the Philly press. It's taking us kind of through a rotation. We're just working on our hardware. Same thing with these Russian kettlebell swings. With rest, we're not trying to do this in a Metcon and get you super out of breath. We want these to be focused, structural swings that are going to help you build your glutes, your hamstrings, get your shoulders and your scaps working, and then put it down and rest again. Here's some complex movements mixed in with some simple movements. So we've got a dumbbell complex and a handstand push-up skill. Okay, so we have a beginner that comes in. They're going to do great with the single arm kettlebell sumo deadlift. The single arm kettlebell clean to push press might be a little bit of a challenge for them. It's going to be a fun stretch for their brain to try and do this exercise that's a little dynamic, takes a little bit of brain power. Then they're going to go to a strict handstand push-up and they're not going to be able to do it maybe. Okay, is that a problem? No, they're not likely, somebody who doesn't have a strict handstand push-up likely won't even kick up against the wall. It's going to be scary. So we could provide a simple alternative. Okay, they'll just do a push-up. They might do a pike strict hand push-up, all right? But we're blending in a couple different skill levels within one, kind of prep complex over there on the left. Now the advanced trainee can go in, they're going to breeze through the kettlebell work, and they're going to get some good, strict handstand push-up tempo work in that complex, just to refine some skills and to give them some unilateral training. All right, let's go to the next page, see what else we can pull out of this. Great, here's some really good time under tension sets that we have in this upper push and pull time under tension focused strength work. Elevator dips that are 8 seconds each, single arm dumbbell torso rows that are 5 seconds per repetition. So if you think about that, you're doing 5-second repetitions for 8 reps per arm. That's 120 seconds of pulling. So 120, is that, did I just do the math? No, it's a minute, excuse me, a minute and 20 seconds of pulling. That's 80 seconds. A minute and 20 seconds of pulling is a long time, and that's how we build time under tension. That's how we get more blood rushing to those muscles. That's going to keep the weight down, because you can't pull your 1 rep max for a minute and 20 seconds straight. You're going to have to keep it moderate. So we stay out of that like high intensity zone when we're working more of that strength structural balance. So those are some good examples of how we can use time under tension and how they show up regularly in the training. Yeah, and then seeing some of the, simple movements and some skilled movements show up in these like warm-ups and finishers. We've got, dip supports on rings. Okay, that's a great drill for beginners to start to get introduced to rings. And it's also a fantastic drill for advanced athletes to really refine their positions, right, that they might not get, because when you're an advanced athlete, you end up doing more concentric, eccentric contractions, going fast, building more volume, going back to isometric, fundamentals and lower order or lower skill movements is something that helps an advanced athlete refine, keep continuing to upgrade their hardware, remodel their hardware, stay injury-free. This, by the way, this fatigued, oh no, there we go. Fatigued abdominals, I'm super excited about. It's a whole series of Metcons that are going to be hitting the Saturday sessions in day 5 in Persist. And there's going to be a sort of a similar version in the minimalist program as well. But I experimented with this for a while with a couple clients, and just awesome. Awesome in that when you do core work under aerobic stress, it makes and forces you to brace and work different intrinsic core muscles than if you were to do these under no fatigue. And that's what I find to make it so valuable, that you you will start to feel ring body saws and rower pike ups in a different way. Okay, let me get to, we're almost through here, everyone, almost right on time. Okay, and then under the hood for Persist Minimalist. Persist Minimalist for the last 3 months has been, or 2.5 months, has been offered as a low equipment and a body weight version. So 2 separate tracks. They're being combined into 1 track where things that show up with equipment, there will be also a body weight version that's quite similar. So that way, if you have the dumbbells or you have the band, but you don't have the dumbbells, you can switch quickly over to the body weight option. And what you see here is that even with minimalist training, we've got high skill movements that show up. Strict handstand push-ups are still there. So there's still a place for that even within low equipment training. We see high time under tension stuff happening over here in the structural balance work. This is a time restricted structural balance format that I've been using. Every 90 seconds you complete a resistance training movement. So instead of most EMOMs or most every minute on the minute, every 90 seconds on the 90-second workouts that are seen in the community tend to be conditioning focused, where it's working at under fatigue and aerobic stress. This one is more about resistance training. It's a great, I like that format because it's easily progressible by just changing the time domains over the course of several weeks. Yeah, I think that covers that. So takeaways. the more you understand, this is that point I was making, the more you understand the training, the more you're able to sort of go off script and change workouts to suit your needs, which is essential when you're in a group design, because the workout was not written for you. The workout was written for all of you. And by writing it for all of you, it doesn't necessarily honor you specifically. So if you know more about what you're doing and you know how you're feeling on a given day, then you will be able to change the script a little bit to meet your needs. Staying true to the tempo is really a way to maximize the impact of this training. That might be a great place to really focus in the next week, is to nail your tempos perfectly. And the way to do that is to use a metronome or stare at a clock while you're exercising. A metronome is that's something that beeps every second to give you an audible clock going. And you can get one, you can download one. There's plenty of metronome apps for your phone. Yeah, that's a great way to say this. It's funny, I'm like saying that about something I wrote, but actually I wrote something. Satya changed the language. It sounds way better. And I'm seeing it for the first time. I'm like, oh, that sounds better. So if you're stuck on thinking about, man, my 1 rep max hasn't budged in so long. Okay, remember, that's your absolute strength. And it's harder and harder as you become more and more trained to push your absolute strength higher and higher. But if you broaden your perspective on what strength really means, and you start to think about strength balance, you start to think about movement quality, you broaden that, you can really start over and start to see so much more in the way of improvement. Use the concepts of movement pattern and intensity balance throughout the week, especially if you can't get all 5 days of training in. So you're gonna, the workouts for Persist are written with 5 days of training in mind. Okay, great. There's balance if you do all 5 days. If you pick out 3 only of the 5, and you happen to pick all 3 days that had pushing in it, remember, that's gonna get you a little out of balance. Is it the end of the world? Are you gonna develop a shoulder problem because of it? No, not necessarily, all right? But now that you know some things, maybe you look at the program and be like, okay, I gotta do a squat pull day, I gotta do a push hinge day, and I'm gonna do a core upper body day. Great. Now you have a way of navigating how to balance out some of that movement pattern stuff. And then from an intensity standpoint, again, this is about checking in with yourself and how you feel. If it's supposed to be a high intensity day and you're supposed to challenge yourself and go hard and fast and lift heavy, but you're not feeling it, you need to auto-regulate and turn the dial down. High skill and low skill movements, remember, they have their place in your training, no matter what your experience is. If you are a very experienced athlete, do not overlook the simple stuff. I would argue that you should lean into that stuff more. If you're a beginner athlete, recognize where the high skill stuff is and be caught and cautiously approach them so that you're not pushing yourself into, unfamiliar, dangerous, compromised positions. So this is just, this has been, that concludes kind of the material. I'm just wanting to look over, these questions over here, and also mention something else is that, I talked about training today, program design concepts, as they relate to this group training model that I've got. And many times I said, if I was coaching an individual, we would do it this way, but because we're doing it this way, this is how you want to arm yourself with knowledge and language. As a company, Revival Strength, we do a lot of individual coaching, and individual coaching is a way to truly customize training for your needs as an athlete, for your access to equipment that you have as an athlete, to match your lifestyle needs. So if you do truly need to train 3 days a week and that's what's best for you, then designing a program that's balanced relative to 3 days a week would be very valuable. So if you are, if that's the first time you've ever heard that we offer individual coaching with these design principles, at the foundation of it, then definitely you can inquire about our individual coaching services. We'll be able to link you guys to that page, and you can have a consultation with one of our coaches or me about who would be the best person for you to work with on that. I appreciate your time and your attention through this. I think for the most part throughout this entire hour and few minutes, we've had 100 participants logged in. So it means so much to me that you took an hour out of your day to listen to me talk about something I love to do. I am getting emotional just thinking about it, because I really am grateful for this platform to speak to everybody about fitness. That's changed my life, and it has really helped me build a very special life that I have around me. So thank you again for tuning in. There will be more of these to come. And if you have follow-up questions, please send them to us through our support email inbox. That is support@revival-strength.com. And we will be getting back to you. And if there were things that I missed in the chat box, Satya has been collecting those notes, and we have this recorded, so I will be able to go back and review and give you answers either in a newsletter or in the next webinar that we have. And if you're joining Persist this coming Monday, good luck. So excited to have you. And I look forward to getting your feedback and seeing how the training develops. As a matter of fact, I am off right now to go design weeks 2, 3, 4, and so forth for the program, because I have got some excellent ideas from my backyard research that I've been doing lately. So thank you again. And now I'm going to go and awkwardly figure out how to turn this off after I've just said goodbye. Y'all have a great day.